What would happen if you took 5 of the largest theropods the world had ever seen and put them into the same ecosystem? This is more than a battle royale. Let's simulate how these big, mostly carnivorous dinosaurs survive, adapt to, and compete with one another when thrown into the Morrison Formation of late Jurassic North America. Unfamiliar ground for these big 5 megatheropods, complete with an arena kindly constructed by Tyrant Prime's terraforming team. Our contestants are Acrocanthosaurus atokensis, the ridgeback ripper of North America, Deinocheirus mirificus, the Mongolian swamp-dwelling giant, Carcharodontosaurus saharicus, the iconic carnivore that gave its name to the biggest family of megatheropods, Spinosaurus aegyptiacus, the ancient enigma and river-dwelling apex predator, Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant lizard king. Each megatheropod's size, combat ability, inferred behavior, and hunting strategies are taken into account, and will cover the available diet in the Morrison, competition with native predators, habitat, and their ability to come out on top in a brawl against one another, so make sure to stay until the end for the full fight breakdown. Can entire populations of these animals successfully coexist on neutral territory? Or will their ferocity and raw power prove too much for the ecosystem they're fighting to dominate? In order to understand how the Big Five can attempt to fit into the ecosystem and outcompete one another, we need to A. understand the basics about each animal, and B. look at the Morrison Formation itself. Let's start with the smallest invasive species, Acrocanthosaurus atokensis. And before you ask, no, Acrocanthosaurus is not the 5th largest theropod. The Big Five that Tyrant Prime chose for this particular time-traveling experiment were selected in part for their size, as they all passed the minimum 5-ton threshold required to count as a megatheropod, but also for their unique builds relative to one another. If we went purely based on the 5 biggest theropods, we'd have T-Rex, a T-Rex clone, Spinosaurus aegyptiacus, and 2 Carcharodontosaurs that are practically identical in terms of body shape and hunting style. Tyrant Prime demanded 5 different contestants, not 5 that function like 3, so here we are. And while many of the visuals were produced in Prehistoric Kingdom, this simulation isn't based on game mechanics or stats, but information from the fossil record itself. Acrocanthosaurus atokensis was a Carcharodontosaurid, a large-bodied theropod with serrated cutting teeth, a narrow skull, and elongated neural spines. It lived in early Cretaceous North America and was found all across the continent, ranging from Texas to Maryland, indicating that its 4 to 6 plus ton hook-clawed build was a highly successful one. It lived with and likely dined upon the enormous sauropod Astrodon, or at least its young, and the same disclaimer applies to the contemporary titanosaur Sauroposeidon, which as an adult was roughly in the 40 to 50 ton range. Tyrannosaurus, a cow-sized iguanodontian, would have formed a portion of Acro's diet as well, fleeing from the ridge-backed predator along the floodplains and mud-flat shorelines of the western interior seaway. I will note that while a 2025 paper found the largest specimen of Acrocanthosaurus to have a mass range between 7 and 8 tons, those estimates were based on predictive equations rather than detailed muscle modeling, which brings the ridgeback ripper down to 6.5 tons for the biggest individual. But listen, that's still a 6.5 ton theropod with claws like grappling hooks. I wouldn't criticize its weight if I were you, unless you want to end up as a Cretaceous Lunchable. Deinocheirus mirificus stands out from its 4 rivals in terms of its diet. The gigantic ornithomimid, a relative of the fast ostrich-billed generalists like Gallimimus and Struthiomimus itself, gave up speed for sheer bulk, and preferred a mixed menu of fish and water plants to the carcasses of sauropods or ceratopsians. Its long arms with huge claws would have been its chief form of defense, but don't count out that nasty beak. Often affectionately referred to as Shrek in the paleo community, thanks to its association with Cretaceous swamps, Deinocheirus weighed between 6.2 and 8.4 tons, making it one of the largest bipeds to ever walk on Earth, carnivorous or otherwise. It lived in a niche that allowed it to usually avoid conflict with large predators, although research has found that Tarbosaurus fed on Deinocheirus. Whether or not those bite marks represent predation or scavenging is unknown, but one thing is sure, Deinocheirus would have been a lot safer from digital attacks if it had signed up for NordVPN, today's sponsor. NordVPN may not have been around in the Cretaceous period, but it's around now, and it's designed to protect you from modern threats like malware, phishing, and even the dreaded advertisement Saurus. Are 5-ton tyrannosaurs trying to use viruses to steal your personal information? NordVPN shuts them down in their 3-toed tracks, using its built-in next-gen antivirus technology to scan all of your downloads and block harmful files or websites before you get trapped in their jaws. It also keeps your privacy protected when on public networks, making sure your personal information doesn't get snatched by ambush predators. As if that wasn't enough, NordVPN still has the VPN, as in you can legally enjoy your paid subscriptions based in your home country while traveling far away to exotic places, like, say, the Morrison formation, the modern day version anyway. This all-in-one app, loaded with next-gen antivirus protection, a VPN, and other features, boosts your digital safety defenses, all with the convenience of a single subscription. Use my special code Vividen to get an exclusive NordVPN deal along with 4 whole months free, and if it's not for you, you're not risking anything, thanks to NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. Now back to the video. Carcharodontosaurus saharicus was a childhood favorite of mine, and it's easy to see why. This challenger's imposing skull and wicked blade-like teeth were the reason the family Carcharodontosauridae bears its name. The shark-toothed lizard lived in North Africa in the late Cretaceous roughly 100 million years ago, and was the region's undisputed apex predator on land. While it's only known from a partial skull, that skull is absolutely enormous. Depending on the close relatives you use to fill in the gaps, Carcharodontosaurus was between 12 and 12.4 meters long, and 3.5 to 4 meters tall at the hip, with masses between 8 and 9.2 metric tons. That's 2 tons heavier than Acrocanthosaurus and just above the highest estimates for Deinocheirus, making Carcharodontosaurus a heavyweight contender in this battle of gigantic theropods. The Jurassic period has never seen anything like this beast. And while the Jurassic had its fair share of large megalosaurids, like the 3 to 5 ton Torvosaurus teneri, one Cretaceous megalosauroid is set to make a splash. I'm referring, of course, to Spinosaurus aegyptiacus, the gigantic semi-aquatic theropod from North Africa that sometimes coexisted with Carcharodontosaurus. Spinosaurus favors the shallow water of rivers and lakes, similar to Deinocheirus, but isn't above taking terrestrial prey on occasion in addition to its main diet of gigantic fish. Its main advantages here are its huge sail and long paddle-like tail, which could function as important intimidation tools in addition to its sheer size. Spinosaurus aegyptiacus has multiple fragmentary specimens that indicate adult sizes of 14 to 15.6 meters long and 8.5 to 9.9 metric tons, making it even bigger than Acrocanthosaurus, Deinocheirus, or Carcharodontosaurus. Don't forget its long arms and huge claws. While it didn't have the range of motion to swipe at rivals taller than itself, they're still scary-looking weapons and would help it catch its food. And now for the 800-pound gorilla in the corner, or rather the 9 to 11.5-ton bone-crushing apex predator. Tyrannosaurus rex lived at the end of the Cretaceous period and represented the pinnacle of a gradual body mass and firepower increase among tyrannosaurs that had lasted for millions of years. Part of the reason why the Tyrant lizard king was built like a bodybuilder and had senses like a bloodhound crossed with an eagle is the prey it hunted. Edmontosaurus was a fast hadrosaur that averaged 5 tons and peaked at 13 and could have defended itself with its muscular tail in addition to kicks and bites. Imagine a horse the size of an elephant and you've got yourself a typical Edmonto. Then turn that into an Archosaurian rhino and add an armored frill, and you've created Triceratops. T-Rex had to be big, agile, and devastatingly powerful because Triceratops was also all of those things. At 5 to 10 tons, Triceratops had the muscle to back up its fierce weaponry and a beak that could do serious damage if it connected a bite. These selective pressures, combined with intense intraspecific combat and competition, created a carnivore that could detonate bones, outmaneuver other predators its own size, track prey from miles away, and hunt effectively at night. Not to mention the tyrant's durability. Its skull was built like a brick, with thickened bone layers adapted to take bites and impacts from members of its own kind. Every one of these megatheropods was fine-tuned for its own unique, competitive environment. But the Morrison formation is a different beast, and the visiting challengers will have far more to worry about than just dealing with one another. Native competition is the first factor we need to discuss. The Morrison may not have hosted megatheropods quite on the level of these big five before, but it's no stranger to dangerous carnivores. Allosaurus across various species ranged from 1 to 5 metric tons, and is infamous for its unreasonable aggression. The amount of pathologies recorded from Allosaurus skeletons, many of which were inflicted through severe violence, is staggering, and range from broken ribs to shattered jaws and fractured arms. Not only did they fight each other, but they appear to have frequently tangled with heavily armed herbivores outside of their own weight class. That makes you wonder what was wrong with their threat assessment skills, and also raises the possibility that Allosaurus may end up being more confrontational than is wise when met by theropods twice its size. Torvosaurus teneri is the other large predator of the formation, and for the sake of simplicity, we're folding the giant specimen Edmarca rex into the species, although some have argued it deserves its own genus. This strongly built megalosaurid was sleek but muscular, with a long skull stuffed full of comically large teeth. Torvosaurus's hook-claw hands were useful for snagging smaller prey like Dryosaurus and Camptosaurus, as well as handling carcasses during post-mortem feeding. As powerful of a predator as Torvosaurus may be, it doesn't have favorable matchups into any of the big five, and the same goes even for Allosaurus annex. The biggest Torvosaurus yet discovered hangs out at 11.4 meters long and 5,100 kilos, which is big enough to be a threat to young invaders, but doesn't stand a chance against any large individuals of even Acrocanthosaurus, much less the true giants like Spinosaurus and Tyrannosaurus. In the event of food-motivated brawls, Torvosaurus would quickly find itself behind and likely be knocked to the ground, where it would be even more vulnerable to attacks from larger competitors. At that point, it would be best to flee the scene of the kill before it became lunch itself, although it has to be pointed out that Tyrannosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus would be by far the biggest threats. Deinocheirus and Spinosaurus don't particularly care about this fight, and Acrocanthosaurus, while still larger than Torvosaurus, isn't twice its size. Most of the competitive pressure that Torvosaurus can offer will be against young Megatheropod individuals, but for adults, especially the uber-aggressive Tyrannosaurus that's double its weight, it won't offer much of a threat. Ceratosaurus is mostly a non-issue. Topping out at roughly 1 metric ton, it's enormous by modern land predator standards, but on the smaller side of mesopredator in this simulation. Ceratosaurus is believed to have frequented watery areas like lake shores and riversides, ambushing small herbivores that come to drink or feed. It may target the young of our introduced contestants as well, at least when they're very young. Tyrannosaurus juveniles were likely Ceratosaurus sized by the time they were 4 years old, but 4 years is a long window of vulnerability. Even the mightiest hunters have to start somewhere, and it's doubtless that any breeding population will suffer casualties thanks to predation, accidents, and disease. This would keep even the Megatheropods from completely and instantly dominating the Morrison due to the sheer chaotic proceedings of mortal life. We also need to remember that cannibalism is a thing, in addition to the competitors attacking one another's young. That's nature for you. The Morrison environment itself is not a passive player either. The formation lasted for a 10 million year stretch in the late Jurassic, and for the purposes of this video, we're using a composite version of the environment with all of its known fauna from across that time period. As such, we should acknowledge that the Morrison included warm, forested floodplains and swamps in the north, with deserts and dunes in the south, providing a varied landscape. Many of the fossils from the formation were deposited in playas, dried lake beds, riversides, and lake shores, the water-filled arteries of the continent that hosted most of the vegetation. That floral profile included horsetails, cycads, conifers, and ferns, typical mid-Mesozoic fare. And around bodies of water, the plants appeared in high enough densities to host significant populations of herbivorous dinosaurs. Dryosaurus was a wolf-sized, incredibly fast browser that may have traveled in groups, dashing from plant to plant in order to avoid predators. Its small size and high speed means it would likely only be a valid target for young contestants, particularly of the Tyrannosaurus variety. Its close relative Camptosaurus bulked up considerably, trading speed for muscle mass while keeping the beaked browser build. That's a much more tempting target for all of the visiting Megatheropods, although Allosaurus and Torvosaurus likely saw it as a prime meal as well. The ornithopod's speed means that ambush tactics and adaptations will be critical. 2 species of Stegosaurus call the Morrison formation home, and they're both incredibly dangerous herbivores. The smaller of the two, Stegosaurus stenops, has more rounded dorsal plates that are staggered along its back, and seems to have reached the 2 to 3 ton range with some frequency. Stegosaurus ungulatus is larger, with adults at 3 to potentially 5 tons, and its dorsal plates appear to have been paired in addition to being much sharper than those of its smaller relative. Both varieties of Stegosaurus were capable of defending themselves against large predators, armed with devastating thagomizers that could punch through bone. We have abundant fossil evidence of thagomizer-induced injuries on brutalized Allosaurus skeletons, and such effective weapons would have deterred larger carnivores as well. However, Stegosaurus wasn't invincible by any means. We do have unhealed bite marks on Stegosaurus cervical plates, areas of the body that wouldn't have contained flesh, indicating that this Stego in particular fought an Allosaurus and ended up on the losing side. But still, its weaponry was formidable, and any of the Megatheropod contestants dropped into the Morrison would need to be very careful when approaching this prickly prey option. Any one of the Megatheropods has the raw power required to take down a Stegosaurus, even one of the big adults, but avoiding the meter-long spikes is a different question. In order to avoid those biological lances, you need to either spring an ambush and take out the Stegosaurus from the front before it can react, or be agile enough to pivot around the herbivore while attacking it. The best suited of the Megatheropods to attempt this is Tyrannosaurus, given how A, it's the most cursorially adapted of the group and therefore could move the most quickly, and B, it's the most agile, able to turn as quickly as an Allosaurid half its size, and has the best chance of dodging a tail swipe. We may see a population of Tyrannosaurs that specialize in predating on Stegosaurs given their pre-adaptations to hunting enormous, agile, heavily armed prey. Most of the megafaunal biomass, and by extension calories, of the Morrison Formation is locked up inside sauropods, however. Oodles and oodles of sauropods, so many sauropods you don't know what to do with them. Diplodocus carnigii was a 24 to 26 meter whip of an animal, extremely lightweight at only 12 to 15 tons. The other species, Diplodocus hallorum, was up to 32 meters long, but still only would have weighed 27 tons at full size. On an absolute scale, either species is still larger than any of the introduced megatheropods, but the issue for Diplodocus is how it's built. In the Morrison, its adult size alone was a sufficient defense most of the time, so it didn't need to be incredibly robust or armored. Its low-slung body leaves its neck crucially exposed, easily within biting range for giants like Tyrannosaurus, Carcharodontosaurus, and big acros, and it was far too slow to escape them. It's a walking buffet for over-tuned megafauna hunters. Barosaurus lentis falls in between the two Diplodocus species in terms of size and is broadly similar when it comes to build. A 27-meter noodle of an animal, Barosaurus focused on low-elevation vegetation and had relatively short legs, which leaves it vulnerable to megatheropod jaws. Approaching it from behind would be quite dangerous, however, given its whip-like tail. Studies go back and forth on the plausibility of sauropod tails being used as effective weapons, with some saying they'd be high-speed impact tools and others saying they could only be used as such once before shattering. Theropods hunting Flagellicaudatan sauropods would need to learn the dangers of ambushing from behind. Camarasaurus is known from 4 officially recognized species, although between you, me, Ray Wilhite, and Brian Curtis, I think it's oversplit. The largest specimen of the purported Camarasaurus supremus was roughly 23 meters long and weighed 17 tons, with its neck at about 4.5 meters off the ground. That's too high for even big Acrocanthosaurus to reach, but isn't outside of the biting range of Carcharodontosaurus or Tyrannosaurus. Plus, its side is available as an attacking substrate as well. Camarasaurus is better able to defend itself than Diplodocus, however, with long, powerful forelimbs that could crush or kick potential attackers. Its relatively short tail wasn't as effective of a weapon, but might be able to get a lucky swipe in if attacked from behind. Overall, Cam isn't quite as good of a meal as Diplodocus, but it's not out of the realm of possibility for even big adults to be on the menu. Haplocanthosaurus falls into much the same category as Diplodocus and Barosaurus. It appears to only really have size as its chief defense against the predators of its day, and doesn't have the height advantage or easily weaponizable forelimbs of Camarasaurus or potential whiptail of Barosaurus. At only 12 to 13 tons, it's about on par with mass estimates for the biggest Tyrannosaurus specimens, but lacks the defenses required to break the tie. Acro, Carc, and T-Rex are all going to be delighted whenever they find a Haplocanthosaurus, fully grown or otherwise. However, other sauropods from the Morrison are not so easily defeated. Brontosaurus, which might end up becoming a Podosaurus again at some point, was much more robust than the Diplodocines, built like a boulder with legs. Brontosaurus typically tops out at 22 meters and 15 tons. Size-wise, that's not out of the reach of Tyrannosaurus or Carcharodontosaurus, but its build makes it a less appealing target. Apatosaurus is on a completely different level, maintaining a robust linebacker build, to quote Brian Curtis, but on a bigger scale. Large specimens of Apatosaurus are estimated at 23 meters long and 22 tons, with fragmentary Apatosaurian material known as the Oklahoma Giant scaling to a 60-ton behemoth. It is highly unlikely that any of the megatheropods introduced to the Morrison, even those that likely specialized in hunting sauropods like Carcharodontosaurus, would go after a big Apatosaurus. It simply isn't worth the risk of being crushed underfoot or getting your ribs shattered by a well-placed kick. Supersaurus isn't built the same way, but it's so darn big that it doesn't much matter. Smaller individuals might be on the menu, but Supersaurus peaks at 39 meters long and over 40 tons, the weight of 4 typical adult T-Rexes put together into one monstrous herbivore. And yet, the most intimidating sauropod of the Morrison has yet to be discussed: Brachiosaurus, the skyscraping giant. Brachiosaurus might not be as heavy as the Oklahoma Giant or Supersaurus, at approximately 45 tons based on confidently referred material, but it's constructed like a siege tower. Its most vulnerable area, its neck, is 6 meters off the ground, and its titanic forelimbs can be used as bludgeoning or stomping weapons against anything approaching it from the front. You could potentially take advantage of its short hind limbs and small tail to attack from the rear, but it's really not worth the risk when there are so many better, easier options out there. Of course, going after the juveniles of any sauropod species is always an option. Acrocanthosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus would likely focus on eating diplodocine and apatosaurian sauropods, taking adults when absolutely necessary, but preferring to focus on younger victims. Tyrannosaurus would join them in that brutal contest, outmuscling Allosaurus and Torvosaurus like the gigantic tyrant it was, but also function as the chief predator of Stegosaurus, given its previous experience with Triceratops. But what about our river-loving friends Deinocheirus and Spinosaurus? Let's start with Shrek. Deinocheirus would target the low-growing and freshwater plants of the Morrison Formation, a roster that includes ginkgos, squat cycads, and horsetails, the latter of which are tough on teeth but rich in nutrition. Deinocheirus' powerful beak should be able to process these plants without too much trouble, given that they were broadly similar to the gymnosperms available in its hometown of late Cretaceous Mongolia. The fish available here are small, but quite diverse and populous compared to what Deinocheirus is used to, giving it readily available sources of lean protein. Spinosaurus may struggle with the diet change in comparison. Its 6-foot-long jaws were specialized in hunting enormous fish like Onchopristis and Mawsonia, while the Morrison chiefly offers fish less than a meter long. Ceratodus is the largest lungfish of the formation with a maximum length of 2 meters, but most individuals were less than half that size. Spinosaurus may be forced to be more of a generalist than it was at home, supplementing a diet of small fish with whatever terrestrial prey it could capture. Everyone needs to drink water after all, and if it stays by rivers and ephemeral lakes, then maybe it could surprise small sauropod juveniles or injured Dryosaurus. We know that related Spinosaurids weren't above eating pterosaurs when given the opportunity, a behavior that logically extends to Spinosaurus itself, and the Morrison was rich with turtles that could provide puzzle feeding enrichment experiences. Small, primitive mammals like Fruitifossor were also common here. There is another major food source that needs to be discussed: each other. Large predators typically don't go after other large predators when they're hungry, especially when easier prey is an option. But when times are tough and resources are scarce, meat is meat, and even if the Megatheropods aren't going after each other, they're liable to threaten one another or fight over the limited food resources. Having all of those diplodocines out there is great, but adding 500 new Megatheropods to the environment, 4 of which are hyper-carnivorous and require enormous amounts of territory, will make for stiff competition. This is where the Battle Royale truly begins. We know that Tarbosaurus fed on the Deinocheirus holotype, although whether that was predation or scavenging is unknown, and the big duck would likely be in serious danger when surrounded by predators even bigger than the Tyrannosaur it used to live with. Spinosaurus is unlikely to attack it looking for food, given its more gracile build and specialization for eating fish, but there might be conflict between the two given their similar diets. Deinocheirus has the height, robusticity, and claws to throw hands with its bigger opponent, not to mention that beak. But Spinosaurus' jaws shouldn't be underestimated, nor its 1 to 3 ton weight advantage. Deinocheirus might be able to use its long, stiff tail to stun or dissuade its larger opponent, buying itself enough time to escape. Their claws and skulls are actually at about the same level, and Spinosaurus has a far more threatening bite. If both are at maximum size, Spinosaurus likely has a small advantage most of the time, taking a 55% win rate. Most of the existential threats to Deinocheirus, however, will happen when it ventures on land to sleep or forage on taller plants. Adults wouldn't be significantly threatened by Allosaurus or Torvosaurus. They should be able to defend themselves fairly well against Acrocanthosaurus, which was typically 1 to 3 tons lighter and a meter shorter, within claw swiping range, earning a 55% win rate against the sail-backed carnivore. Carcharodontosaurus, however, is going to be a serious issue. While the various specimens and reconstructions of Deinocheirus give it a 6.8 to 8.4 ton range, quite respectable, the neotype of Carcharodontosaurus varies between 8 and 9.2 tons depending on which relative you use to fill in the postcrania. On average, the shark-toothed lizard has a full ton advantage in terms of raw mass, and its weaponry is far superior. Carcharodontosaurus was also tall enough to avoid the worst of Deinocheirus' claw swipes while inflicting serious wounds itself. In a hunger-motivated confrontation, Carcharodontosaurus would come out on top 70% of the time. Against Tyrannosaurus, the situation is even worse. Tyrannosaurus is taller, faster, more agile, and stronger than Deinocheirus, and behaviorally used to battling members of its own kind on the regular. T-Rex is outside of claw range and has a bite big enough to engulf Deinocheirus' entire skull. To be fair and account for sample size, we'll consider T-Rex as a not fully grown individual based on Devilrex, at 12 meters long, 3.8 meters high at the hip, and 9.4 tons. Obviously, Tyrannosaurus has a number of much larger specimens, with Scotty, Sue, Bertha, and Co. comfortably pushing past 11 tons, but we have far more discovered individuals of T-Rex than we do of any of these other Megatheropods. Devilrex was roughly 18 to 20 years old when it died, with some period of active growth left, so that makes it a little more fair. Even so, its advantages against Deinocheirus give it a solid victory in the majority of situations. Deinocheirus, against its Megatheropod comrades, has an average victory score of 38.75%. Acrocanthosaurus is the smallest of the invaders, but that doesn't mean it can't find a slot to fill in the Morrison. It's triple the size of a typical Allosaurus and still notably larger than even the biggest Torvosaurus, while using its overbuilt arms to hook into prey shorter than itself. Its greatest chance of success may be hunting juvenile sauropods and injured Camptosaurus, although taking down a young Stegosaurus might not be entirely out of the question. The problem that Acrocanthosaurus has is that each niche it can fill in this blood sport version of the Morrison can be filled more aggressively and competitively by the other contestants. Carcharodontosaurus is a bigger and more specialized sauropod hunter, and its greater height and skull size would prove to be a devastating edge in a confrontation between the two carcs over a carcass or territory. Acrocanthosaurus is dwarfed by Tyrannosaurus, even by our young adult Devil Rex example, and gets outmuscled, outsped, and outmaneuvered, all while not being able to hunt Stegosaurus as effectively. Acrocanthosaurus versus Spinosaurus is very unlikely to occur in the first place, given the size and niche differences between the two, but Acro might try to steal some of the smaller terrestrial animals that Spinosaurus relies on for its mixed diet. If Spinosaurus chose to defend its kills, its 3-ton advantage, combined with height, jaws, and intimidating arms, give it a confrontational victory more often than not. Acro gets an average victory score of 33%. Carcharodontosaurus is in heaven. The landscape is filled with lightweight sauropods barely larger than itself, allowing it to bring its serrated, thin blade teeth to bear with catastrophic effect. With an average recon Carcharodontosaurus at 8.6 tons and 3.7 meters tall at the hip, it's far more physically powerful than any predators that Diplodocus or Barosaurus would have encountered in the Jurassic. As already discussed, it can effectively bully Acrocanthosaurus away from its kills, and would be well suited to predating upon Deinocheirus when encountering the murder duck on dry land. Carcharodontosaurus versus Spinosaurus is an interesting conversation because that's one of the only megatheropod fights that may have actually happened in prehistory, given their coexistence in Cretaceous North Africa. Their dietary preferences are different enough that conflict is likely rare, with Carcharodontosaurus going after sauropods and Spinosaurus aiming for fish and smaller land animals. Their maximum sizes are fairly close together, with Spinosaurus having a bit of an edge in mass. The most plausible way they'd come into conflict is if a Spino leaves the water to rest or hunt and strays into the vicinity of a hungry Carcharodontosaurus defending a carcass, as it's unlikely that Carc will be submerging itself in the water in most scenarios. Spinosaurus may be slightly heavier, but Carcharodontosaurus has its mass distributed more like a battering ram than a tadpole. Carcharodontosaurus's jaws are wider and more powerful, but Spinosaurus's head is higher, giving it a better vantage point. Ultimately, the deciding factor would be maneuverability. Carcharodontosaurus has longer, stronger legs and a shorter tail, letting it turn faster and build up more speed to use its mass to its advantage. Toppling a Spinosaurus by charging it from the side wouldn't be terribly difficult, letting it employ its crippling bite. 60-40 in favor of Carcharodontosaurus. That victory may not be long-lived when Tyrannosaurus rex enters the picture. Even a subadult T-Rex like Devil Rex is heavier than even the highest estimates for Carcharodontosaurus and operates at a similar level vertically. Make no mistake, both of these combatants have the firepower to potentially kill the other in a single well-placed bite. T-Rex's bite may be stronger, and its skull far more durably built, but Carcharodontosaurus has teeth that can slice through skin and flesh like butter, cutting crucial arteries without the need to crush bone. In a confrontation between these two predatory titans, once the threats have turned to violence, it's all about who gets the first hit in. Ultimately, that's slightly more likely to be T-Rex. Its heavily reinforced skull can be used as a charging weapon against other animals, knocking aside attacks and allowing T-Rex to chomp down first, aided by it being twice as agile as its Carcharodontosaurus opponent. At these sizes, however, it's going to be close no matter what, with a 55-45 split when using a subadult T-Rex, which changes to 63-37 with a fully grown Tyrant. Overall, Carcharodontosaurus has a very respectable 60.75% win rate in this battle royale. The only matchup left to discuss is the most contentious historically. Tyrannosaurus vs Spinosaurus has been a brutal flame war since 2001, and I don't need to tell any of you why. As our understanding of these two animals has changed, so has the intensity of the debate. Spinosaurus went from a long-legged, insurmountably gigantic land-dwelling killer to a still gigantic, shallow-water crocodile duck with a tadpole tail. Tyrannosaurus ecology hasn't really changed, but our understanding of its size has. Every histologically fully grown specimen is between 9 and 12 tons based on public data as of this video's recording. Much of the same logic as Carcharodontosaurus vs Spinosaurus applies to this famous fight. They likely wouldn't overlap too much, with Spino content to stay in its lane, hydrated and happy, while Tyrannosaurus does its own thing on land. The problem is that T-Rex's thing is getting into an insane amount of fights and frequently practicing cannibalism, which indicates that it wouldn't just see other Megatheropods as threats to be eliminated, but food resources to be harvested. A Spinosaurus coming onto land to sleep is suddenly a new potential menu item that has to at least be experimented on, and there really isn't anything stopping T-Rex from simply charging into the water when it's feeling particularly bloodthirsty, given how it was a perfectly capable swimmer. That means that T-Rex would be the one to instigate a fight more often than not. It's too tall for Spinos' claws to be effective, its skull is thick enough to take bites from its own kind, which are much stronger than Spinos, it's far quicker on its feet in terms of both speed and agility, and its jaws could crush Spinos' relatively lightweight skull without much difficulty. Devil Rex could take down even the largest Spinosaurus individuals at least 65% of the time, although that's likely being very conservative. Adult T-Rexes would find Spinosaurus pretty easy meals at 75%. To sum up, we have Acrocanthosaurus in 5th place with a win rate of 33%. Deinocheirus follows in 4th place with 38.75%. Spinosaurus passes it by 10 points with 48.75%. Carcharodontosaurus is the first to win more often than it loses at 60.75%. To the surprise of perhaps 2 people, Tyrannosaurus takes a win rate of 66.25% when using a subadult individual, a percentage that shoots up to 75% if you include fully grown adults. The reason it's so dominant in the Morrison, even with such stiff competition, is that it can hunt in a variety of niches while also being physically superior to potential rivals. T-Rex can pretty easily overpower small sauropods like Diplodocus and Acrocanthosaurus, can take down and outspeed Camptosaurus when young, and is by far the best adapted theropod here for handling Stegosaurus. Its agility, raw power, thick skull, and crushing bite make it the Megatheropod Battle Royale champion for today's episode. But realistically, I'd expect to see it and Carcharodontosaurus divvy up the megafaunal herbivores as they specialize further. Carcharodontosaurus would take on sauropods most of the time while T-Rex goes after Stegosaurus. Acrocanthosaurus and Torvosaurus, unfortunately, would likely get outcompeted fairly quickly by the two juggernauts, while populations of Deinocheirus seem to be perfectly well adapted to the river systems of their new home. Spinosaurus would shrink over time if it survives long enough, changing to suit the smaller prey fish of the Morrison and perhaps gaining more robust jaws to take advantage of the high turtle density. This project took a lot of research and work, so please subscribe if you enjoyed it and would like to see more videos like it. Thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this video, and don't forget to use my unique code Vividen to get an exclusive NordVPN deal along with 4 whole months free. You can always use NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to you. I've thoroughly enjoyed using Prehistoric Kingdom's documentary setting to create ecological battle simulations for this video, and I'd love to do more. What hypothetical matchups would you like to see next? If you want to support what I do and gain early access to videos, you can join the channel at the Megatheropod tier to join the dozens of other paleontology superfans. I'm the Vividen, and I'll see you the next time I take an awesome bro question and turn it into an ecosystem-wide world-building project.